we did hear from Minister Melanie Joly, Foreign Affairs Minister, today, following a meeting with that Canada-U.S. committee. She said that they are looking at talking to members, different allies, about how they can continue to head off that issue about the possibility of tariffs coming from the United States. President Donald Trump has said 25% tariffs could be imposed on all Canadian imports into the U.S. by February the 1st. Canadian government says it's ready to respond, but is there something more that can be done? Let's go back to our front bench. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, George Soule, and Laura Stone. I'm going to start with you on this one, George. Do you think that Canada has prepared a robust enough response? And I say that considering, and a bit of a callback to our last topic of Chrystia Freeland, who's, he's running as the potential contender as the Liberal leader, but she was the Deputy Prime Minister, somebody who has also fought against Donald Trump, and saying that, look, it has to be strong. She wants a list of $200 billion worth of Canadian products or U.S. products that we could tariff coming in. Do you think our response is being robust enough right now?
Well, I think the response is always going to be complicated. I mean, the fact is they're 10 times our size in our economy, and it's going to hurt. Whatever, what they do is going to hurt our economy, and any tariffs we put on are going to, Canadians actually end up paying those as the prices come down on us. So I think we need a really thoughtful strategy that is united. And while the Liberals are dealing with their own leadership issues, we haven't had real leadership. Again, Justin Trudeau's there. Nobody's got any kind of real respect for his authority anymore. I mean, including his own cabinet, clearly. So it'd be nice if there was some kind of centralizing force. We've seen Doug Ford trying to use this now as an election issue so that he can run on fighting Donald Trump. So frankly, I think it's a complicated issue, and I think instead of focusing on how to make it robust enough and how to make it an actual pushback that can actually make change happen, I think we've got too many of these politicians trying to use it for their own gain rather than actually fighting for the country.
Dan, I think what's interesting is in the last couple of days, we've seen this sort of war of words that almost turned into a tariff war with Colombia and the United States. And it seemed like it was something, and then Colombia backed off, and now Trump has sort of claimed victory. And all of this is happening, as Melanie Joly says, well, we need to talk to international allies to really band together. Do you have a feeling, do you have a sense that allies will be willing to get together to go and try and have a united effort against Trump? Or do you think that, like Colombia, once they get their back against the wall, they may back off and go, okay, forget it, we call mercy here?
Well, certainly there's an international component to this. I saw Chrystia Freeland today announced her plan for responding to the threat of tariffs, and it included convening world leaders that were also impacted by these threats. That may have some impact. I guess the question is really how much leverage is it really going to add to Canada in this conversation? And it really depends on what kind of conversation we're dealing with. I think, frankly, you referenced Colombia, and the question is, are we dealing in a war of words? Are we dealing in this sort of art of the deal attempt at sort of framing the conversation to his advantage, as Donald Trump has a habit of doing? Or are we dealing with something much more problematic for our economy, which is a more extremist wing of the Donald Trump team that would, I think, seek a more isolationist policy and believe that tariffs are just naturally good for America's economy and should be levied against Canada if it's not a part of the United States? Obviously, that's a really dark scenario, and I think that's the one we're all most worried about. Canada is, I think, preparing for the best case scenario, which is that we're dealing with, the incoming Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, and a team of people inside the White House that are actually interested in getting a deal done, perhaps a bilateral trade agreement between Canada and the United States that Trump can claim victory for. And this is really more about image and more about sort of macro politics in the domestic market for Donald Trump. I think we can hope it goes that way, and certainly we've got to prepare for the worst case scenario, which the federal government is doing with retaliatory tariffs. But I'm not sure that some sort of convention of international leaders is going to change that dynamic for us, right?
Yeah, and Shakir, I know we've seen in the past during Trump 1.0, if you want to call it that, he sort of relished that being the one person that is sort of leading the charge and having the conversation. Do you think that, as Melanie Joly had said, going down to D.C. next week and having these conversations, how important are those when you do consider, even what George had mentioned there, that a lot of people look at this and go, okay, well, what kind of a mandate does this Liberal government have anymore?
I think it's about the mandate to negotiate, but I think a lot of it, to be frank, is on the American side. It's not clear to me, and I haven't heard exactly what Donald Trump actually wants from Canada. I mean, if it's about stopping the flow of migrants and stopping the flow of fentanyl, I mean, that's great news for Canada, right? Because we have control over that, and it's something we should be doing anyways, and we can address that. But if it's about, becoming the 51st state, or if it's about bringing manufacturing back to the United States, we're in deep trouble. I mean, as we saw over the weekend, as you referenced with Dan, with the Colombia example, Donald Trump is a guy who deeply believes in the use of tariffs and the results they can produce for his desired outcomes. And I think if he wants manufacturing back to the U.S., all we can do is put our hands in the air. Maybe we can retaliate. But again, we saw the Colombian president try to push back against Trump. And what did Trump do? 25%. And in a week, it's going to 50%. And my view is if we slap tariffs or retaliatory tariffs on the U.S., sure, it's going to cause some pain to the U.S. But as George said, they're 10 times the size of our economy. Whatever we do to them is going to be peanuts. And I think what Donald Trump wants to see, whatever the results are that he wants to get from tariffs, he's probably going to get there some way. And until we can actually find out exactly what he wants and why he wants to impose these tariffs, we're just in the dark, throwing darts at the board in the dark. And I'm not sure we can get a result or any kind of end game that we want to see until we can figure out what he actually wants from us.
Laura, I'm running out of time, but I'll give you the last 20 seconds or so here.
Well, look, I mean, I think Donald Trump wants to win, and what that looks like is not entirely clear. I think Canada is trying to diversify its approach. Nothing that really Canada or the provincial premiers or industry seems to have done appears to be changing his mind, Mr. Trump's mind, in any substantial way. He keeps repeating the same threats and the same talking points, quite frankly, that he has for the past several weeks. So is Canada in sort of a wait-and-see holding pattern until we know exactly what Mr. Trump is going to do and what he's proposing? I'm not sure that there's really anything any of us can do at this point to change his mind, but he certainly needs to feel pressure from within the United States. And he needs to feel like he has gained something. And, I don't know his mental state, but he seems to like to feel like he has a one-up on everyone and he's a winner. So Canada has to try to present a scenario for him where he feels like he has gained something in this tariff fight and these tariff threats that he's enacted on us and a number of countries from around the world.
Yeah, all of this as February 1st is approaching very quickly. Laura Stone, George Soul, Shakir Chambers, Dan Moulton, thanks so much for being with us.